Today we're going to look at the top 7 mistakes I made when starting speed reading. Let's go. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so as it helps the channel grow. Now, the top 7 mistakes I made when speed reading. Number 7 is not practicing enough. What that means is that you learn the techniques of using your guide and chunking and all these cool techniques. However, we don't get to practice it enough to see the result. When I first started, I learned the techniques, but I wasn't consistently training or practicing what I had learned. If you don't practice what you learn consistently, you're going to get inconsistent results. Number 6 is not understanding the shortcomings of the techniques. Now, this was a big one for me, and it took a while to realize, because when you learn the techniques, you don't necessarily look at the shortcomings. You just think, wow, it's great to have these techniques and just follow through. But what you need to understand is techniques like using a visual guide, for example. If you go too fast with your finger, then what happens is you're visualizing a few words or maybe even a sentence before. If you're going too slow, then what happens is your brain is already ahead. So you need to get that balance. If you want to learn more about speed reading, then click on the description below, as I've got a whole course based on my playlist on speed reading. So click that down below. So not understanding the shortcomings was a big one. Same thing with the chunking method. You can chunk 3 or 4 or 5 groups of words together. However, you could still chunk, and at the end of the chunk, there could be words like and the. So it doesn't give you a complete picture. So what you want to be able to do is chunk in groups that gives you better pictures. And again, that takes time and effort. Number 5 is not reading widely enough. I only had a couple of books that I was practicing on, but even though I was doing that, I wasn't getting much progress. So what you need to do is you need to look at not just non-fiction books if you're already reading that, but look at fiction books, look at directions, look at newspaper articles, look at research papers. Get a whole bunch of reading done in the widest possible manner, because you want to be able to use these skills for any given content, and it'll put you in good stead once you start practicing this skill as well. Number 4 is not being patient. Now, speed reading takes time. It's not one of those skills. It's not like memory techniques where you can learn the technique and get the result pretty much straight away. Speed reading is almost building a habit. It's very difficult. So when you first start off, you need to practice. You need to get the consistency and the time in, because if you don't, you won't see much progress with it. Stick with it, because it does work. You just have to make it work. You have to build yourself up. Otherwise, you can't just learn the skill and say, yeah, I'm speed reading now. Doesn't work that way. You have to make speed reading work. It's like looking at a car. If you're outside of the car, you look at it and you go, oh yeah, the car doesn't work. It's just sitting there. Whereas you have to get in the car and drive it. Do you see where I'm getting at? That's how that works. So make speed reading work for you, not the other way around, because it's not going to work if you do it the other way around, right? Number 3 is not using my visualization skills. When I started speed reading, I was just looking at the words. And as we know from this channel, if you've watched a few videos, words are abstract and they don't necessarily have any meaning until an image is created in the brain. Now, whether that's a second later, 2 seconds later, 4 or 5 seconds later, there's a delay there. And when you're reading, what happens is that you don't necessarily get the image straight away. You read. And then what happens is that you haven't got the image. So you go back and reread, right? Has that ever happened to you? I'm sure it has, right? You go back and reread because we haven't got the image. So what we need to do is we need to see everything in greater detail. And so if we're reading with good visualization, then we can comprehend a lot better and recall the content a lot better as well. I'll give you an example. Let's say you read a sentence, the contract needs to be signed by April 2021. You look at it and you go, well, that's quite a basic, boring statement. But let's look at the key images here. Contract, maybe it's an old piece of paper, maybe it's written in fountain pen, so we've shaped the contract as an image. And April, we can say, oh, April is Easter time, right? So you can have a Easter bunny signing a contract. So now you've shaped that whole sentence. Instead of seeing a sentence and not getting anything out of it, now we've got something out of it, right? You don't have to build a massive elaborate story. That would be memorization. You just have to quickly see images as you're going. And that's what speed reading is. It's seeing images, not memorization. Use your visualization skills to read a lot more powerfully so you can remember more. Number 2 is not testing my understanding and recall once I've done my speed reading training. This is a big one for me because the problem that I used to have is I used to read and just forget. So I was terrible at reading in general. When I started speed reading, I did improve my reading, I did improve my comprehension, but I didn't test myself enough. When you first start out, it's important to test your recall and understanding, communicate what you read to others, whether it's family members or friends, just so you can make sure that, oh yeah, these techniques, these skills are working. And I want to make sure that it does work a lot better in the future. So test yourself and see how that goes. And my number 1, and this is number 1 for a reason, is not using specific books to train for speed reading. Now, what does that mean? What you can do is you can pick any book and use that for your speed reading training. It doesn't have to be books that you really want to read. That's what I was doing at the start. Books that I really wanted to read, I was speed reading, and because I was learning at the time, I just wasn't getting the value out of that book. What I did was I picked a few books. I said, okay, I'm just going to practice on these books. These are going to be my practice books, right? The books that I really want to read, they're on a different side. Books that I want to practice on, they're on this side. And as soon as I did that, I got a lot better. I read a lot more. And those books that I was practicing on, I actually learnt a lot more than what I did with the other books. So give that a go. Practice as much as you can because speed reading is all about practice. That's it for today. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to comment down below and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.